fellow adventurers. Hello, wonderful people. You all know I mean it when I say you matter, right? I'm serious. You are important, a positive influence on the world around you. I'm glad you're here to share a little time with me. Come on in. I couldn't really call our sandbox safe, but you are welcome. If you're new, you've found Dresden's Tale. This is episode 72. It's season 3, volume 3, chapter 68 in our life-loving tale. This is high military fantasy, the kind that needs heroes. Ours is Dresden Fane, a warlock, a dwarf, the kind of guy who just keeps on going even when life gets tough. He's a warrior of the Stone Clan, clueless to the nuances of polite society. I'm Lewis Nichols, your Weeble Wobble. That's right, push me around and I won't fall down. Hit that like button, or don't. I stand strong. Leave a comment and I gush with excitement. Don't, and I trudge on down the path to glory. Oh yeah, you can't stop this. I happen to be the guy who wrote this thing, a forever project spanning 2 decades and a whole cartload of Word documents. Thanks to YouTube, I now have a reasonable way to pass it on to you. Show of hands, hit that like button if you've ever spent time in a desert. I have. I was born in one, Fort Defiance, Arizona. With a start like that, my rise to fame must have been foretold. When you hear someone say, "But it's a dry heat," that really means something. Listen, a 45 degrees Celsius day, it's hot. No excuses. However, I also lived in Galveston, Texas for a few years. It took a long time to get used to the humidity. It feels like walking with a wet blanket over your head. I mean it. The air had a weight to it, a consistency. Damn it, folks, air is not supposed to have a texture. It felt like you were being waterboarded 24/7. Being an island, it rarely got over 34 degrees Celsius, but I'd still take Arizona heat most days. The other thing, it gets cold in the desert at night. You get a break. If you were lucky on Galveston, it might get down to 30. Really, I was way too young to enjoy Arizona, and I did have fun in Galveston. My life was very different there. All right, no more nostalgia. Vool is not insanely hot, but like Galveston, it never cools off. It stays around 37 degrees all the time. No chance for a break. But Dresden's real complaint isn't the temperature, it's the eternal light. Vool's unique astronomy is harder on some species than others. Pterodon, Equirta, Minotaur, and humans, they seem to do okay. The Pteryx don't. Gnomes and dwarves, that is. The Tagara hate it too. Now, that leaves a lot out, but we're not going to go into every single species that I have. Suffice it to say, you will get a little frayed around the nerves before you get used to it. Sometimes Pellicar's sanity stat actually comes in handy. Here on Insane Vool, Dresden has found the army. It's just a few days since our last episode. It's Freed's 11th day, 2,052 years after the fall.
Tribulations 54. Nothing comes between God and man. Nothing but the hubris of mortals and the intemperance of the divine.
Meh, I wouldn't blame the Church of Omadon, or the militia either. This wing over there, they're a bunch of assholes. That plain statement had diffused all the tension there might have been between Dresden and the rest of Irving's command. A lanky Katosan Monkey, an assistant to the camp boss, was the one who said it, and he didn't stop there. But if you want to fight about it, I'm good. You're one of this year's promising new upstarts. One of about 50, that is. If you beat me, you're still on the rise. And if you don't, you're probably going to be okay too. The monkey performed a standing backflip, landing, weapons ready. Bravado in the Stone Clan was as normal as sand on Vool. Dresden grumbled a response. "I'll see you in the yard, maybe, but I'm not challenging you for something somebody else did to piss me off." Then left to sort out their accommodations with Liz. "He uses 2 swords. I can do it." Kira had been impressed by the flipping monkey, Dresden caught her the next day with a mace in one hand and a long dagger in the other. That old man talked to you in opal. He might not have known what he was talking about. He smiled at her. You probably can, but one of those swords is going to be just for blocking. Some people call it an arming sword for some reason. It's not really a sword. A sword's a sword. I know some people fight with two weapons, she persisted. He nodded. It was a few minutes before he went on. They were having a conversation, and he didn't want to mess it up by telling her she was wrong. Usually, when they talked about something he knew about, she either proved he didn't, or he raised his voice trying to explain. It rarely worked out. It's pretty flashy. I know you'd look good doing it. Don't make fun of me. I don't want to look good. I want to be effective. He almost compared her to Liz, but stopped. You can't help but look good. She let out a sort of giggle. You're in a punchy mood. What's wrong? Nothing. She jabbed him twice with the blade, then stepped forward. When she did, she brought up the mace to swing at someone's imaginary head. Seriously, what do you think? I think there's a reason 80% of warriors use a shield and sword, or a mace, or spear, or something else. That old man knew what he was talking about. You use a hammer. Liz uses her fists. Dresden froze, detecting danger. He met her eyes and realized he'd quit breathing. Ugh, he stuttered. All right, you can do this. There are books on weapons theory. We should see what we could find. She looked back at him for a moment. It was one of the things he loved about her. She was never in a big hurry. I guess. She jabbed the dagger into the wall next to him and gave him a long, aggressive kiss. News was, it would be a few days before they could go into action. Dresden and two other pocket spacers spent a few hours every morning moving a command team around the countryside. The mission was partly just a scout, but also preparation. Unless the remaining Itarians withdrew, they'd have to approach along a 50-mile wide corridor with access to water. The Kelds prepositioned their own water and learned the territory. Dresden was surprised how much he had in common with the other warlocks. One an elf, the other a human. They were both excited and concerned about their futures. The elf had heard about a variation of their specialty that would allow them to send non-living cargo a longer distance. Dresden only thought of it as one more possible application that would keep them off the battlefield. Nanok's been pretty good about leaving me to my business. Hopefully he's gaining some profit from my service, Dresden told them. The human shook his head. Not me. Irving had to twist my master's arm. He actually did twist his arm. It was kind of funny. If I'm unfortunate enough to live through this, I'm never going to get to leave Moldab again. The elf nodded. Well, my master is old. Another 20 years, he'll be dead, and I can go on my own way. No questions asked. Thank you for the training. For Dresden's part, he could have spent the rest of his time in a hole, snuggled up with Kira, hidden from the sun. Unfortunately, the rest of his group decided he needed to make friends. He wasn't much for conversation, but he listened, at least until somebody said something dumb. Chief Ted will be around for years, and this Prater garbage is a waste of time. By the time there's a new chief, nobody will remember his name. I had an aunt who had visions. The prophet is no different, gifted with the clarity of the future. If it's so clear, why does he talk in riddles? Finally, it was the 11th, 9 days since the wagon ride, 6 days since they'd arrived in camp, 2 days since operational squads of militias started to venture out to find the enemy. This was the day, Irving promised. He hasn't let us down yet. Dresden sat with his team. There were 4 other groups in the vicinity, each with their own fire pit keeping to themselves. Orrin was cynical. We haven't really known him that long yet. Liz spoke up. Even if his tactics don't work well, he's still reliable. I like him. Karen smiled. So did you? Liz snorted. Reliable to his wife, too. Coward, the two said in unison. Dresden grunted. I like him more and more every day. You know, it's not that the elites that... Well, never mind. What? Kira asked him. but he kept his lips sealed. Karen answered for him. That was the first few words of a rant on how the Stone Clan is corrupt. Dresden says plural marriages are bad. Donald tried to keep a straight face. Dresden is very wise. Kara looked like she wasn't entirely convinced. I'm sure that's it, Liz groaned. Before the dwarf could respond, a man appeared in the middle of the fire pits. Scatter six! Let's go. It had been a long time since Dresden botched a skiff. He barely thought about the formation of the glyph. Scatter six. That means there's been engagements, but not the main force. We'll be spread out, Donald said. If we find the enemy first, we'll need to send alerts out fast before they can overwhelm us. I got it. Karen patted a horn at her side. You gonna drink that? Dresden shook his head. Probably not coming out into a fight. He was right. The small group emerged from the astral 20 feet away from one of the markers Dresden had been part of setting. There were warriors, but they weren't Itarians. 20-something men, a strong squad, waited for them to deploy. Let's go. The group commander decided he was in charge, and Dresden didn't argue. Straight east, block search. We fought a few patrols and a supply caravan, but that's it. There should be a much bigger force. They were supposed to be around here yesterday. They hiked 5 miles and turned north. They walked 2 more before starting back east. After a few hours, Dresden had pretty well reconciled himself to the fact they were not going to get into the big fight they were looking for. He was feeling surly. We'll go north, the commander told them. It's out of our search grid, but this isn't doing us any good. Why don't we go farther west? Because of the hippogriffs? The man pointed to the sky. They have those grids. They can see far more than we can. Dresden hadn't seen a single flying mount, and still didn't, but that didn't mean they weren't up there. Who set the grid? If you must know, it was set by portents and divinations. Well, then I'd say it's more likely somebody blew their search than the Itarians being outside the boxes. How do you miss 500 warriors? Dresden grunted. Well, someone has. Maybe they're obscured so you can't see them from the air. Maybe you can't see them from the ground, the commander argued. Then it doesn't matter where we go. Dresden started walking west. He thought about running, but he didn't know if his own group would keep up. You have an intuition? Before he could answer, Liz cut in. Dresden can tree a fight like a hound goes after a squirrel. Dresden didn't answer. Liz was feeling surly too. What I want to know is why you trust the divinations, but not Prater. Not now, Liz. It's just a question. It's not the same. It's exactly the same, she hounded him. Dresden couldn't keep his voice down. Battlefield divinations are given to priests. Do you hear that? Directly to trained priests. Seeing, or whatever you want to call it, is a layman's power. I won't say it's shit 100% of the time, but it usually is. If someone tries to predict the future, they're either nuts or trying to take control. Dresden had made his point, and Liz didn't want to push him too far, so everything got quiet. Only the wind blew across the wide, sandy plains. The militia squad followed, but they were 30 feet back. Kira wasn't sure what to do. She stopped, just short of telling Dresden to stop yelling. Donald picked a random direction to take watch, and Orn kicked some dust in the air. What is that? The Tagar pointed to the ground. He kicked again, and Dresden saw striations form in disturbed soil. He poked at the ground, but found it solid. It's stronger over here. Donald found lines forming in the soil without the help of one of Orn's kicks. He began jabbing at it with his sword. Could be some kind of underground beast. Could be the Itarians. Liz stomped on the ground. Veteran priests of Omenin can swim through the ground. So can earth dragons, Donald pointed out. It looks like the sand is sinking into the ground here. Kira found a spot where the vibrations were particularly strong. Dresden struck the ground with his hammer, but nothing happened, so he struck it again. A hidden stone broke away and fell. Kira could hear the sound of perturbed voices coming from below. Orn stuck his face over the small hole. There's light down there. The group snapped into action, clearing dirt and stone. Dresden hammered away as the squad of militia came over to find out what was happening. They didn't question. 2 men with big hammers joined Dresden in the assault. Another, larger piece broke away. This time the cries were more severe, and the voices clearly Iterian. Horns! The commander ordered. Widen that gap. I can fit now, Dresden insisted. You have no idea what's down there, Karen pointed out. Dresden grunted. I'm about to find out. You little bastard. Liz was jealous, but she tossed her stolen hammer to the side and got a rope ready. Give him hell, guys. I'll be down there in just a minute. Dresden's descent was barely controlled. He stayed just ahead of Kira and the other relatively small members of their force. If he gave the enemy time to prepare, he wouldn't have a chance. Hitting level ground, he struck out to catch a bearded Iterian in the gut. Contact! Dresden yelled. He didn't know who could hear him. The fissure was cramped, but Dresden soon realized he was in a crease off the main Iterian effort. More of his allies arrived, and they pushed forward, out to engage the enemy. If just one of them was a true veteran, they were going to be in a lot of trouble. Even as he drove forward, he could hear the rain of stones behind him as reinforcements widened the way. Dresden pushed into a Minotaur, driving him back. It gave Kira and a spear-wielding dwarf just enough room to cover his flanks. He killed 3 men when a spray of dust and stone chips blasted them from behind. He didn't know if the passage would now allow the rest of his fellow Kelds to follow, or if the crevice was sealed entirely. Ahead, there was a moaning roar, like a cow giving birth. It was hard to see, impossible to judge the enemy's strength. Dresden pushed forward again. Kelds rally! Kelds rally! The dwarf got a good look at an Iterian trying to rub the dust out of his eyes and struck his skull cap. The armor held, but an eyeball popped out of the man's face. Dresden kicked the shocked man in the groin and moved forward against the next man in line. Dresden kicked at a torch on the ground, sending the light away. He wished it were the plain sun's, but for now it was darkness. This was the realm of the Terax, and his fellows knew it. The first Iterian to grab up a torch was focused down and dead within seconds. Let me tell you about the warriors I've fought beside. They are all stronger than you, both in character and skill. Dresden struck his next opponent in the ribs. I fought at the side of a man twice your side, in a battle to the death with sand mummies. They'd have been right at home on Vool. My friend Merle Whedon, that was his name. Tell him about Staten, he heard Karen's voice. The last big crash must have opened the way for the bigger warriors. Dresden howled. I will. The Aquirta with a plan. Led us into battle against the beastmen. Oh, the suffering he would have brought down on you. If only he would have survived the fight. Another strange roar sounded. Dresden continued to advance forward, finding a 20-foot stone worm. He also discovered many of the Iterian sappers were not warriors, and they began to panic. It was becoming clear the enemy was trying to open a tunnel all the way to the coast, or at least underneath the open waste and into the unprotected fishing villages. Striking the worm was like hitting solid granite. Dresden backed away when the creature turned. Its mouth was beak-like, with a single protruding tooth capable of cutting through stone. It took one look at the dwarf, turned, and began its escape back down the corridor. Dresden led the battle of the crevice. First, he trailed the worm, killing any Iterian who got past it or tried to turn it. Kira was at his side for a time, then a pair of plague-clan dwarves, and finally a gaggle of gnomes and a dark-skinned elf from Etwine. They all shifted in and out of battle so regularly he couldn't keep up. In the end, as they pushed past the dead corpse of the worm, they were supported by a Tagara spellcaster who favored bolts made from ice, and another spellcaster who used fire. He did not recognize the species of the second, a short, strange, insectile warrior with fist-sized eyes Dresden chose to avoid looking at. When the worm was dead, there was room for more warriors to join the fray. Dresden called to his companions to keep up the pressure, still fearing if they lost the momentum, the cavern would become their final resting place. Dresden didn't know how many he killed, but eventually his arm could no longer lift his hammer. He gave no argument as orders from the rear came from a change at the front. Slumping against the edge of a cavern, he closed his eyes as the light-bearing soft skin surged forward to carry on the fight. Go, Dresden, go! There go the Iterios! He picks up a hammer and he swats it back down, cracking kneecaps and pound, pound, pound. All right, that's our killer dwarf and his A-tier constitution going at it again. He's like the Energizer Bunny, just keeps going and going. No wonder he has more luck with the ladies than one would normally figure. All right, I guess I deserve that. Well, that was chapter 68, fellow adventurers, and this season wraps up with chapter 72. I don't want to do the math, but we're getting close. Nothing to dwell on now. Don't worry, there are many battles left to be fought. Hopefully, you've left your comments if you had any hopes or dreams for this season. I'm pretty sure by the time you hear this, the last episode will have been recorded, uploaded, and waiting in the queue. However, you can always let me know what you're hoping for next season. In the meanwhile, I want you all to know that I appreciate you joining me today. I hope you all have lives that are filled with love and success. You're all winners, and you deserve it. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.